So they're streaming live on Facebook.
All right, I think we are live.
Are we live?
Hello, everyone. We're live.
Hello, we're live.
This is Kevin Hunting, and I am here with Holly Krivo, and this is Stepping Out. How are you doing?
I am doing so well. I've been looking forward to talking to you since we scheduled it and all day. So I am so excited to be here.
Well, usually, like I start off, and again, this will just take its course, but
Yeah.
I'd love for you to just share a little bit about, who you are, a little bit about your prior experience, and then, what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's so interesting. I need to figure out a way to like wrap up what I've done because it's a very diverse background. I have worked in all sorts of different industries. I started out in college athletics. I worked for a major sports corporation in New York City for a while, and then working in communications and marketing, media relations. So a lot of storytelling, public relations type jobs, because that's always like a passion of mine since I was little. I'd like write little books, like 4-page books, and I love to read and love to talk and ask questions. So did that, and then I worked for USA Softball for about 5 years, which was just a phenomenal experience. Traveled all over the world, did the Olympics.
Oh wow!
So just an amazing. I would not change that for anything in the world. And then my wife and I, we weren't married at the time. Then we moved to Austin, Texas, and I worked in nonprofit, did some fundraising, communications, which was somebody who was terrible at fundraising as a child. I don't know how I got doing that as an adult. For the Andy Roddick Foundation.
Ooh, I'm a huge tennis buff.
Are you?
I like glued to the television. It's hard for me to be productive because like US Open, totally. I just was watching even though there was no crowd. But it was, I love tennis. I played too. I did play in high school as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you play now?
I don't. And if we got on the court, you would be laughing because I think I need a good, I need a good refresher. I just need to sharpen up my skills. I know it's like riding a bike, but I love tennis. So I just
it's so fun. Yeah, I know when the Open was on, I was really like working, but I would have it like on my earphones and I'd be like, so that was such a fun time. And then I got into healthcare. So I worked in business development for a major corporation or major hospital in Austin. And then, so that was kind of like my corporate career, I guess. And it was interesting because I found that one, I liked working with really high performing people, whether it was athletes, surgeons, like leaders, I liked that type of people. And I loved like helping tell a story or get a story out. And so I had a friend, it was kind of funny because I worked with her and she was going to school to be a therapist at the time. And she was close to leaving the company. And she was like, I'd helped her through some stuff. She's like, have you ever thought about being a life coach? And I was like, no. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like, how did I not think of this? And it was so funny, like how it kind of works. She's like, well, you've coached me through some things. And so I started looking back at my career and like everything I had learned and what I was good at. And like, all the things that I had used in my own personal development to be successful and what I had learned and like to be positive and motivating. I was like, I need to do it. And it was so funny because at the time I was like, wanted to do something different. I was really good at my job. They didn't want me to leave.
And when was this? What year was this?
2018.
Okay.
Yes, 2018. It's like, what is time anyway? So it was 2018 and I was looking at getting my MBA, but I was like, I don't want to get an MBA in healthcare. Like it's such a big investment when I'm not like super fired up. And so it was like, this can be what I can do. And I just fell in love with it. It kind of combined my intuitive questions, my curiosity, my need, like my love for being intentional and habits and kind of pushing people. And it was just a perfect fit. So I started Holly Krivo Coaching. I guess that's been about 1.5 years now.
What do you think has been like the biggest surprise in pursuing coaching for you?
Totally how much it just helped me. Like I had been dealing with some stuff personally for forever, not forever, for probably 15 years, like not really seeking help, but talking to people, thinking through it, trying to work through it myself. And it was so funny through coaching, I was able to really work through that. And I even went to see a therapist after doing the coaching certification. And it was so funny. I was like, I don't think I need to be here. And she was like, yeah, I think you worked through it. I was like, all right, cool. Like, I needed like permission, I guess, for somebody to be like, you're fine. But I think just how much, I think it's helped me through COVID. I think it's helped me just through other issues. And I think, you know, I've always said, if I don't coach a day in my life, which would be a disservice, but like it would have been, the investment would have been well worth it.
That's awesome. And so tell me a little bit about Holly Krivo Coaching. You know, like how did you kind of get to the place of first, who do you serve in terms of your focus, and even, you know, why? Like, you know, how did you come to that decision, I get, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I started out wanting to work with child-free women. I saw a really big need out there. There's not a, like, there's such judgment. There's such like family obligations. And I didn't see anybody talking to child-free women, right? It was like always to moms and like, which is great. But so I was like, ooh, that's what I want to do. And I realized it was such a heavy topic because some people still are really dealing with the nitty gritty of it, that I think it's probably more therapy based, or it's more couples, you know, couples. So I was like, and I had a hard time posting social media content and doing videos because it just always felt like I needed to be very kind of serious. And it was just, I was like, like Katie, my wife and my brother were like, you're not you. Like,
I was going to say, I think there's a values issue here. Like it's not giving you the ability to really express an authentic part of who you are, right? Through your practice or through what you were doing, which is a great learning in itself.
Totally. And it was like, I remember the moment we were at dinner and I thought about it, and I remember sitting there on those stairs behind me talking to my brother, and I was like, I'm not me, like it's too hard. And so I realized is that my passion was for women, especially women, disrupting the norm.
Gotcha.
So doing something different from their norm, and that's different for everybody, right? Like whatever your norm is, but really for women who have these shoulds and these like weight and this voice in their head being like, you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, why would you do that, what will people think? Like getting them out of that to trust themselves and then make it happen. And so that's like kind of where I got to. So kind of adapting that. I still love working with child-free women. I still do a lot of stuff, but it's more of just women out there. And it's usually the high performing women, because we feel like we should do something and we would be really good and we want to meet all the metrics and all that stuff. Men too, like it's not any, but so yeah, so that's where I really got to, is like, I want, like, if you're doing something and like you don't think you can because what society tells you or anybody tells you, like that's like my sweet spot, I'm like, but you can do it.
And so my question here is, how do you show up in terms of like this niche, right, that you're playing in terms of high achieving like women, or, you know, how would you say you're showing up in terms of your own personal experience in who you serve and who you know, are choosing to serve in terms of your practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think for me, it's, you know, leaving, it's kind of what I've done my whole life. Like I've left really like prestigious jobs, but I'm like, it's not filling me up. Like I could stay, I should stay. It's not. Like marrying a woman, that's really not what I should do. Having kids, like that's probably what I should do. Like I've done, you know, uprooting our life for a year, moving to Norway, like things like that, that I'm just like, I don't want to like do it. So I think just my previous experience has really led me that way. And I guess like currently I can't think of anything that I'm doing, but it's always that constant trust in myself that I've kind of really worked at curating. But I think it's just like my history of showing like that I've done it, and it hasn't always been easy, but it's always been like worth it.
Absolutely. And so the point that you made too about trusting yourself, right? And the idea that you kind of, but I'd love to spend a little time, because we have some similar parallels here in that, you know, I'm married to an individual man who we're picking up every 3 to 4 years. I lived in Mexico City for 2 years myself outside of the US. And like, for me, part of that experience, like I don't even think I recognized it sometimes when I was in the moment of making, like, you know, these big life decisions, like I'm going to pick up and move to Mexico City and live there for 2 years, that, you know, you're gaining so much in terms of like confidence and trust in yourself and all of that. But it's almost like sometimes I would say like my confidence wasn't there, you know, like in terms of just waffling on the decision itself, or when like a big decision like that you've had to make, right, where you guys have picked up and moved and now you're living in Norway. have you always felt like confident though? Like that's what I'm saying is, was there always this like deep sense of confidence when going into those types of decisions? Or would you say it definitely has grown and sort of evolved over time based on the decisions that you're making?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think I've always like had that.
Wow. That's okay.
I'm not
That's
saying that
impressive.
hasn't always been easy, right? Like you're
Yeah,
like, you
absolutely.
have those feelings, but it's like growing up, I was like, I grew up in New Mexico, great town, great family, great friends, no complaints. But I was like, I don't want to live in New Mexico. So I went like to Texas for school, which was different for New Mexico, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I want to move to New York City after college. So I moved to New York City. Like I always would, and I think it's just because I didn't want to lead a life of like regrets.
Gotcha.
And so I mean, I think it kind of, as you get older, you definitely grow
Mm-hmm.
with it. But it's like funny, like I've always like kind of known what I wanted. Which is one reason it was like, even with this child-free thing, I found myself a little waffling on it. And so
Mm-hmm.
we were like, okay, well, let's just go see, like, let's just go to the fertility doctor and just like see, you know, because at this point I'm like 37, 38, you know, Katie's like 36. So we're like, we'll just go. We got the results and we're like really old eggs and really old wombs. Like we're just old women on the inside. So, but it was so funny because it like happened and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want this. Yeah, it was a comical joke. My brother was like, that's interesting. But I think that was one of the only things that I kept on wavering on. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it? And so I was like, if I'm struggling with it as somebody who has always been pretty confident in what she wants and doesn't get like swayed, I couldn't imagine what people were going through that were getting pressure from spouse, from family, from society.
Absolutely.
So that's what I think drew me in, because I was like, oh, that sucks for those people. Like it's hard, you know. And so, and I remember being like, you've trusted yourself this whole everything else, and it's always been the right decision. What are you doing? I don't know if that
I
answers.
think that's really powerful that, like you said, because I can say in a similar vein, I knew what I wanted. You know what it is? I'm trying to pinpoint exactly. I knew what I wanted, just like you. Like I grew up in Ohio, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, when I graduated too, I was like, I am out. Bye, see ya. Like one of the few in my family that moved. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I remember I moved with my
Mm,
my good friend Matthew, and so we were living there. And I remember like going after, just like you, I was like driven and went after exactly what I wanted, and really didn't let things stop me too, in terms of like, you know, reaching out to people. If it was like, oh, I want this job now in San Francisco where I ended up, I reached, you know, I made it happen in a way. I mean,
yes,
yes, there
yes.
were other people involved, but it was that drive and that energy, right, that you put behind it. But I feel like, and again, I know we're two very different people. I have to
Mm-hmm.
admit that when Jonathan came into my life while I was living in San Francisco, it kind of knocked me off my feet. The idea of picking up and
Mm-hmm.
leaving my life for someone else, it was a lot for me to work through. Like it just, because I had, in a sense, I think it probably comes down to this idea of control as well. And that I was always in control, right? Like I was making my decisions that I
Yeah.
knew that were going to affect me. And now I had this person in my life that I'm like, shit, you know, like this wasn't in the cards, you know, like, and we moved, I'm telling you, we moved to Dallas, Texas. We moved from San Francisco to Dallas, Texas. And Holly, I was petrified. I was,
Aw.
I was petrified, and not like, funny, it made me small. It made me small in the sense
Mm.
that all that confidence that I had, I felt like it was like someone had knocked like you know, when you're standing on one of those stools or something and it gets kicked out from underneath you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say in that process, I have gained so much in terms of who I am and understanding who I am in relationship to my marriage to him. Like in terms of believing that, you know what, I can put all my faith in another person. And I think that's where a lot of the challenge was for me too,
Mm-hmm.
was that. So I guess, you know, there's definitely nuances based on, I think, you know, each of our
Yeah.
individual relationships. But it's great that, like you said, you just felt you had this power. Like you've always had this kind of, you put yourself out there and you make it happen and you go after what it
Mm-hmm.
is that you really want for yourself.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And like for you, was it the thought that, was it the location of Dallas that you were like the conservative Dallas, or was it more of like, oh my gosh, like now I'm like
I
I don't
think it
want to
was,
say riding on the coattails, like I'm a trailing spouse, right? Which you're
oh
like,
no,
oh, no, 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 no,
no,
no.
and it was. There was so much anger and
Yeah.
resentment that came up for me that I was like, you know what? I'm giving up part of me, like, giving up my fucking life. I had a
Mm-hmm.
great career, and here I am. I've chose love. I listened to my heart. It took me a while, but I really, really did allow my heart to speak to me in that sense, rather than letting logic take
Mm-hmm.
over. And so I
And
followed my heart.
ego, like a
And
lot of
an
ego,
ego.
right?
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. And so for me, it was just, I think it was that idea that I'm like, you know, now, like, how am I, you know what it was? It basically broke all of these things of how we, and especially Western culture, learn to define who we are, right? That it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's about our job, it's about our career. Like, there's so much emphasis that our society and culture places on this in terms of our value.
Yes.
And so there was a lot there for me to grapple with in terms of, now what? Like, I'm literally going to be starting over from scratch. While Jonathan gets up every day, goes to the office. I mean, yeah, he's interacting with new people, and he has to establish a lot of new relationships in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
but he's here for a reason, right? He was here because he had a job. And so for me, it did bring up a lot for me in that sense. And now, again, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
look back and I'm like, thank God this happened in my life, because I wouldn't be here right now managing
Mm-hmm.
my coaching practice and loving every minute of it. Perhaps because I wouldn't have gone through that self journey, that self
Yeah.
exploration of what it all meant to me and why, and me learning to redefine who I was, in a sense, like, and what's important to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, even like we haven't moved international. This is our first international like trip and or to stay. And it was, I mean, it's been trying, it's been testing. It's like, especially with COVID. I mean, and for me, I was glad I, had my coaching going because I can't imagine being here without anything to do.
Yeah, oh,
So like,
absolutely.
I mean, I get involved and I've met a lot of people, but it's like for me as somebody who's like worked since she was like 15 and proud of her work and proud of her accomplishments to just be like, I'm gonna go to the grocery store and make some bread. I'm like, I go to the grocery store too much. I have a job too. You go. Like it's already like, so I can't imagine like starting over with not nothing to do, but without like a
Right.
built-in purpose when you land.
And that was it. I mean, I still knew that I
Mhm.
could find a job and I could look for a
Yeah.
job, but it also, again, there's that's stressful. That whole process can be very stressful, like looking
Hmm.
for a job and interviewing. And so,
Yeah.
talking about your move, talking about, right, your move to
Yeah.
Norway, what would you say has been like one of the biggest challenges that you and Katie have faced being in Norway as a couple?
Um, I would think honestly, it's hard to know what it would be like to be in Norway and then be in Norway with COVID. Like I
I
can't
gotcha.
differentiate those two.
Yeah.
So much together time.
Mm,
Um, both like she works from home a week on, a week off. We have actually a pretty big apartment for like overseas, but it's like a lot of together time. You have friends trying to make, I'm very social. I've created a great network here, but like, how do you have your individual personalities and not just couple, right? Because like we have the same friends in the States we did, but it was like she would golf, I would tennis, I would have a work schedule, we would go here, so it was,
right.
so I think it's just been that. And like, how do you keep like, it's funny because I was explaining this to like a coach that I met here, and it was like, I've never been around somebody so much, but felt so disconnected from somebody. And I feel like I'm airing my dirty laundry, but I think a lot of couples are feeling that, right? Like
Oh,
you're together all the time, but you're not doing anything meaningful. You're just like
right.
existing. You're not having, like, we're lucky that we're able to travel Norway. So we are having some experiences, but we even went to Oslo and it's still that whole like, okay, it's just us two in a different location.
I think I know what you're saying, because I
Oh,
mean,
so
part of it,
much.
when it first happened here, like, we both now were, I was always in the house working, and so for me
Mm-hmm.
it was fine because I'm here by myself, or it was. And then when Jonathan would be here, actually it got to a point where I was like, even I was like, hey, there's no one there's really no one in your office, and he has this huge office. Like there's no way that someone could be within 6 feet of him to begin with. And so I was like, what if you like started working from your office like 2 or 3 times a week? And luckily he actually prefers it anyway, because it's just, it's the efficiency of being in his own space, right? With his work computer, like all the stuff that he's accustomed to that makes his day more efficient than actually working from home. But I totally hear you that there's a moment too where I was like, we're bumping into each other. I can hear you when you're on a conference call sometimes, and the volume can carry over, or, but it's interesting that you mentioned that space of, right, you've never been closer to someone physically, but yet you're not, like you said, you're not really connecting in a very, I don't want to say intimate way, because it's not even intimate. It's just, there's no deep connection that's really happening.
Totally.
Because it's like you're cohabitating or coexisting, right, in the same space.
Right. And so I think for sure. And so it's like that whole, like, cause she had been working here from March through June or July, I think, and then started going back like every other week. And that week we were both like, yeah. And it was nice, right? Like comes home and you're like, oh, it's like a nice break. Like you're more excited to see each other. And it's, so I think for me, and it's hard to tell, I don't think that would have been our case if we wouldn't have been COVID, because we're both pretty active and involved. I think it would have been different. Overall, the experience I think has been a lot easier than we both thought it would be. It's been a pretty smooth transition.
And what's one thing, I'm curious, like, okay, I've never been to Norway, but what's one thing that it could be you have learned about yourself as an American living in Norway? Because again, America has such a unique way of like seeing the world, seeing time, there's like it's just very unique, and it's because it's a westernized society and culture. But what would you say, is there anything in particular that you've recognized about yourself that you're like, wow, like I really appreciate this about Norwegian culture, or this has made me really think about something X differently, whatever that is?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't, I don't think this is like real, like exciting, but I've noticed I talk a lot quieter and I've like slowed my speaking down because they're very slow speakers. They're very intentional. I've noticed, because I always used to say on the phone, like, right. And now I just like, they hear to go, And so I'll notice like in conversation, I'm like, like it sounds silly, but it's kind of a nice way to not, I didn't realize like how much energy you put out in words just like that. So I feel like my pace, I mean, I'm still me, but I feel like it's kind of appreciating a slower pace, appreciating the quiet a lot more. Like we don't have our TV on a whole lot. Like the streets are really quiet. I think just appreciating that piece. As far as myself, I've always understood America as a small little piece of a big world. So I don't think it was like, oh, look, there's a whole big world out there. I think maybe realizing like, hey, in 5 years, we really could just go move to somewhere if we wanted to, like how accessible the world is maybe, because it's a little harder too, because you meet people over here and they've lived in 6 countries, but it's also probably the size of like, Texas where they move around. So it's a little, because for us, we're like, I can't imagine living in 6 countries. So just maybe looking like fully seeing the other possibilities. I don't know.
No, I think is there anything?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Hold on. I think it's my phone. There's a call coming in. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was beeping on my phone for a minute there, and I turned off my Bluetooth so it wouldn't connect to my headset. But I still heard this beeping of the call coming through. So,
yeah,
so tell me a little bit about like, in relationship to when did you get married? I'm curious. Like, I don't think we've ever talked, but when did you get married?
Every time we think about this, we're like having to do the math. 2017.
Okay.
And a week, actually.
So over almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years, 3 years next week, a week from today. So so we got married in 2017. We met in 2006. So been together, I guess, like 14 years
So
or so.
really you've been together, yeah, for almost 14 years.
I know, it's like so funny. I'm like, I want credit for those.
I actually view it that way too. Like when someone's like, "Oh, but when is your marriage date?" I'm like, no. I look at the date that we actually have been together. Like
right.
that was the official date, like when we had the ceremony. But you have to include those years as well. Like why shouldn't you include those years?
Right. Yeah, it's still
right?
like a
Because
commitment. It's
that's
still the
similar.
work. It's still
Exactly.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, we waited over 4 years. Was it? Yeah, over 4 years before we dove into the idea of like tying the knot and committing ourselves to one another, to each other for for life.
So
So
how
what would you
long have
like
y'all been
in relation?
together?
We've been together since oh my God, see, I'm like you. He's so much better with all the math. It's we've been together, we've been married for 10 years. So we just celebrated our 10-year marriage anniversary in August, on August 21st. But we have been together for like over 14 years.
Okay.
Yeah. 14 years of, and I mean, I have learned it's been an amazing ride. I will say it has, overall, it's been an amazing ride. Of course, there's always, there's those moments and there's been those moments, and that's life. I think in general, and how you approach it. But I have a question. How do you think your coaching has perhaps positively affected you and your relationship with Katie? Or not. And maybe it's not possible.
Right. No, I think it's and this is Katie, it's also I'm very, very close to my brother. I'm very close to my mom. Like even, the way I speak is different. It's like asking different questions because you talk about the control piece. Like I like to control, I like to boss, especially people close to me. So it's like I still do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure that they heard me say that. They're like, you still boss me, but trying to be just more open to the conversation and open questions. And, I think for me, it's a lot of, when you're in a relationship, we can get really wrapped up in all the stuff that doesn't matter, so it's like, you get all mad. It's like really thinking through my emotions. Like, what am I really mad about? Like, is it really that,
Gotcha.
She didn't unload the dishwasher, or is it something else? So more of like my copings or my, I don't know if coping is the right word, my skills. And I think, I think a lot of too is just like asking questions and like pulling that out, as opposed to like, well, you should do this. What about this? Like just trying to be more open to that piece. It is interesting though. So we're just going through some like transition and all this as we go back. And so, I was like, let's do a coaching session. So I did like an official coaching session with her this week. We've never done it before. So it like just happened.
Spill the beans. How did it go?
So good. It was so good because it was like, I was like, I'm going to treat you like a coach. So I'm going to push you on things. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to like pull you up, and you're going to be a client. So you're going to, and it was so good because I think that, so often as a couple, there's like things, if it's a situation, right. And you're going over and over and over and over, and you're both just annoyed with it. It kind of took that out. And it was more like getting to the core of the issue. And I think we both felt really good after it. So I think we're going to try it again next week and see how it goes. Cause I think it's a lot of, instead of us just going around in a circle, like brainstorming and thinking through things, it felt more structured.
And so you said you're coming to the end. So you're going to be, when are you guys actually repatriating back to
I know.
the US?
We actually should have called like 3 hours ago. So I probably like mid-December.
Okay.
We had hoped that.
And you're going to go back to Austin or?
We're not sure because they're closing the Austin office down.
Oh, wow.
So it would probably end up us moving to Houston if they're doing a bunch of layoffs at our company. So it's just a lot of transition. They're shutting the Austin office, doing some layoffs for the whole company. So it's oil and gas industry isn't a great time right now. So we'll kind of see. So that's what we're kind of working through, is like, how do we navigate this change in a way, but also like enjoy our time here, but feel like we're putting, it's this balance of, because I think when we got here, we thought that we could stay longer. And I think at that point before COVID, there were opportunities to stay, but now that that's all shifted, they're kind of there's not a ton of opportunities for people to stay. So, but it's mind blowing that it could be like before the end of the year.
I kind of get the sense, right? My intuition is saying you actually would want to stay longer. I don't know.
I
I get this,
would.
like I get that sense that you're kind of like, wow, I'm not sure if I want to, like,
Yeah,
you'll be fine going back, I guess, but
right.
but you're just like, wow, I wish we could stay longer. But and why is that? Like, why do you think, like, for you, why would you want to stay longer? And
Your intuition is correct. It went by so fast. Like, I can't believe, like, I think, I mean, you've done these, like, you think a year seems like a long time, but like, I think if they would have said, do you want to go for 2 years? I probably would have been like, I don't want to go for 2 years. But once you're here for like 6 months, you're like, holy crap. And I feel selfish saying this. I feel like I got robbed of the
I was just
experience
thinking,
over here.
I was gonna, in my head, I was just thinking the word cheated. I'm like, I think she feels like
Yes,
she got
that's funny.
cheated because she's kind of having half the experience in a way, right? Because of
Yeah.
COVID. It's you really haven't, it's not like you said what would be the typical or what would be the normal experience of,
Right.
right, living in a foreign country where you could just, like you said, move around easily, even obviously
Totally.
travel between countries. I'm assuming much more easily. I don't know what
Yeah.
all the restrictions are.
Yeah, because now we can't really leave Norway. We had like 2 weeks where we could. So we went to Poland and then we came back. No, cheated, robbed, and I know this whole year has been that way for everybody, right? Like, I'm not a special unicorn. And like, I was so excited for my mom and brother to come visit. My mom hasn't traveled a lot. That just like broke my heart. And we had friends coming over that couldn't. So it's just, yeah, I just like I got robbed a little of what I thought it would be. But then I also don't know I don't know what it's going to look like next year either to stay. So yeah,
and
it's weird.
what would you say is like one insight that you have actually learned about yourself while being in Norway? I know it's under these circumstances, but what would you say is one thing that you're like, wow, I really found this out about myself, and it's been, either it's been amazing or it was kind of a surprise, or however it was for you.
I think that maybe just like the not what's the word? I think really confirming my ability to like create networks and create community and connections. Like, I'm doing workshops here. I was a TEDx coach speaker, or not a speaker, a TEDx coach. I've like met friends. I'm in groups. Like, that's kind of, I think it's a confidence builder when you're like, okay, it's one thing to do it in the US where, people, it's another
Absolutely.
to be like, oh, I've got friends here and I'm doing this and that. And like, because people are like, you've done so much, but I'm like, it kind of just reaffirms that I still have that maybe.
Yeah. And so wait, did you have already some friends in Norway that you knew or that you had been in contact with, or you literally started these relationships yourself once you got there?
Kind of started on myself. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and it's been really good. And I think it's just showing like, you got to put yourself out there. Like like we all do, right? It's work. It's like dating for friends and like trying stuff on. I've had a lot of coffees that we haven't met for second coffees. So I think it's like a confidence build. It's just a confidence builder to go around and like, I don't know the language, but to like maneuver the language, to maneuver the systems. Like, I think, I've always like wanted to live overseas too. So it's kind of like, oh, I could do this. So like, I could do it again, maybe.
That's impressive. What would you like when you think about the clients that you have worked with, right? And I'm sure you've worked with some amazing women, and probably, I'm assuming, like other individuals, but when you think about that, what advice would you give based on even like what you've kind of themes that you see that are very like not consistent, but there might be some consistency, right, in what you've seen in terms of the women that you're working with? What would you say to other women out there that you would recommend in terms of putting yourself out there, like more of the how probably to do it? Because right, it's one thing to say, oh, just put yourself out there, like you have to get out there, but what advice, or maybe that that you've had or you've experienced or even experienced with your clients, without getting too specific with obviously their individual scenarios, but what would you say to women out there in terms of, this is this is how I would, advise going about it or recommend because I've seen it work. Or
as far as kind of like just taking risks
yeah,
or
yeah,
kind of, yeah.
Taking risks, because I mean, taking risks is inherent. It's an inherent thing that a lot of us, everyone has an issue with. But I'm saying, very specific to women. I'm sure there are nuances there that exist. And so, what would you say?
Yeah, that's okay. Let me see if I can. I think I mean, this is very coach speak. So I'm sure people are like, oh gosh, it's like, what's important to you, right? Like what is like, and why is putting yourself out there important to you? Like, it's not just the act of putting yourself out there. There's a bigger purpose behind it, right? Like I don't just, I hate networking events, like forced networking events, hate them. I'm terrible at them. I shut down. It feels like gross to me. So I don't do them, right? Like know your strengths, know your weaknesses. I joined a tennis club here. I volunteered for TEDx. Like I've done things that speak to me, not just like throw spaghetti at the wall. Right.
Gotcha.
So it's like really coming into like what is important, because it's a lot easier if you're into like badminton, right, to join a badminton thing as opposed to go to a girl meetup happy hour. So I think
that's really important too, because I think I've seen too that sometimes when you're in that space and that's what you need to do, it's almost like you have just blinders on though, right? Like it seems like such an obvious, like when you say it to me, I'm like, oh, of course, like, play into your strengths. But sometimes in those moments, right, where that I need to do this for myself and I want to do it, you almost sometimes feel like you keep bumping into walls, right? Because you're just like not sure how to approach it. So I love how you're saying, like know your strengths and tap into those versus thinking that you have to perhaps, recreate something that you may have no knowledge in, or perhaps like is not really your strength, like you're saying,
right. Yeah. And I think it's just like, what, like, as you get, if you don't know what it is, think back on your past, like where have I excelled in taking risks or meeting people? And it's, I think it's, I don't, and also it's like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, so you're scared to, to call somebody to set up a meeting. The worst is going to happen. They say no, right? You go to coffee, it's an hour out of your day. If it goes terribly, you never have to see that person again. Like, I think we live in a world where everything's like really intense and everything matters. You're like, it's going to be fine. Like, go, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it again. Like I found a couple people I play tennis with all the time. I play tennis once with some people. We don't play again. Like, but it's enough. My brother, when he jokes about dating, he's like, it's a numbers game, right? You got to date a bunch to find the girl. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So it's like kind of what it is. And even, other risks, like applying for jobs, you got to just go after it. And like, it's not just the job. It's like, why do you want that job? Like, why, or you're deciding to get married or have a kid, like, why? Like that,
right. Kind of if you don't understand sort of the intention piece behind, right, what it is that that in itself becomes almost like not a blocker, but it becomes something that's going to stand in your way, because you don't even, like you said, the fundamental is understanding the intention behind what it is that you want to do first.
That's like it's so eloquent how you said it. Better than I said it. But yeah, because it's not about going for coffee, right? It's about creating a connection and building a community and feeling like you belong. Like, it's not about that action.
Absolutely.
Like, I think we get real wrapped up in that. Like, we're like, oh, it's like, no, it's for the bigger purpose.
And I will say that that's one thing that has really helped me, is attaching myself always. When I start to feel myself get to a place where there's either not inaction, but I'm just sort of, staying in the same place and, kind of lolling over, like you said, things that maybe didn't go how I thought they were going to go and whatever, is attaching myself to what is my greater purpose. Like, going back to that is what helps fuel and build that motivation and intention again, that energy to say, you know what, I got to put myself out there. Like, this is how it is, and learn in the process. Another thing I would love to chat with you about.
I want to and then go. No, but it was interesting. So this morning I'm doing like a 100-day workout challenge with one of my friends who's a trainer, right? Because And so this morning I was like, I've got to go in the morning. I have a crazy busy day. I know I'm not going to go between these 2 appointments. I just have to go. So Katie, I was like, will you go? Do you want to go in the morning? She's like, yeah, we'll go at 6:30. And it was so funny. So I get up and I hem haw, right? And I'm like, well, I could go later, knowing I won't, knowing like that's not going to happen because I know myself, because I trust myself, good and bad. And it was so funny. So I was at the gym and I was finishing my workout and I was like, it wasn't the workout. It was the act of like staying committed to what I said I would do. So it's kind of the whole thing is like, what is the purpose? It's like, yes, the workout's great and I need it and I felt so much better, but it was like, that would ate at me all day because I wasn't staying committed to what I said I was going to do.
I love that too. That even in itself is where, right, you can find the energy and the passion is if I just stay committed to what I say I was going to do.
Yes, that's it.
Stay in that space, right? Don't think ahead. Don't think like what's 2 steps ahead or even 1 step ahead. Just stay in that like that present right space of no, this is about you holding yourself accountable to what you said you were going to do, like, and that you're going to do for yourself, really, which is take self-care, right? I mean, working out is just a form of taking care of yourself.
Totally. Because if you were like, hey, let's go to the gym at 7, I would never in a million years be like, I'm not going to show up and meet Kevin at the gym at 7. Right? Like I would never do that. Like, but for me, I'm like, like you can go later. But
we're so alike. I never understood the power of a trainer. I've never had a trainer in my life. We had a trainer for the first time when we moved here to Miami from DC, and I was telling everyone it is like it's the ultimate accountability, like that's all it is. And I was like, I never missed it. I'm like you know what, if I tell you I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there at 5 a.m. You know, like my eyes barely open, you know, not even excited because my body's barely moving at that point in time. But to your point, just the idea of commitment and accountability, just you know, and that's
so good.
It's so easy to walk away with, like you said, with your own self when you're not, like, if you don't have to meet someone, you're right. You can just, you know what, I'll do it between 10 and 11 when you know in your head, you're like, you won't do it. You know, you're not gonna, you're like totally fooling yourself right now. You know?
Then you try and fool yourself. Like, I don't have time. You're like, no, you do. Like, you may have to move some things and maybe a tight day, but like you do. That's like always hard. I'm like, no, you just don't want to. That's what that is.
So one other question I had for you, and this just came up as we were talking, and especially about women, is I've been working with, you know, various women. And one topic that I've noticed has come up a lot is you know, the idea of trusting your voice. And like trusting your voice, which I think is really also equated to confidence, right? This idea of like being confident because, you know, speaking up, like if you're in a board meeting or speaking up when you're in front of a group of individuals and not holding back. And so I just love to get your like 2 cents on it. I mean, not that I know it's very individualistic in terms of what may be blocking someone or what may be standing in their way from like having a voice. But I see it seems to be, I'm not saying it's prevalent with every woman, but it's come up numerous times in terms of that theme, that idea of finding your voice. And I don't know if I'm not sure if may not be finding your voice. I think it's the voice is there, but maybe it's like trusting your voice, you know, trusting your voice, like trusting your words, that what you're going to say is, I mean, the word valuable comes to play, but it's that, you know what, that doesn't matter. Like we attach so much to like what we say, right? And how other people are going to perceive it, or how it's going to leave us looking, right, in the eyes of others. And so it just came to me as we were talking, and I thought I would throw it out there to see what your perspective is. I know it's, again, different for every individual.
Right. Well, yeah, because I think it's like kind of goes with like trusting yourself, right? Because that's one thing, but then trusting your words is a different thing. And part of that is like, it's a skill, right? Like I think it's flexing the muscle. I have not always been great at that. Like I am, you know, especially when I worked at the hospital I worked at, I'd be in a room with like all the C-suite, heart surgeons, neurosurgeons, like just a packed room. And I'm like, I would get really tongue-tied, and there were times I wouldn't say things. I think it's natural, especially when you see a group of really powerful women. I mean, there was a lot of women at the table too, men and women, that you're just like, is what, like, surely they're smart enough to know what I'm about to say, right? Like, what can I bring to the table? So I think it's like trusting your strengths again. Like my strength was that I wasn't a brilliant neurosurgeon or a CFO who just looked at numbers, right? Like I was good at relationships. And I'm like, I saw this, he said this, I think this could be going on. And they're like, oh, great. Like, so I think trusting that you're bringing you'd said valuable, an insight that nobody else can, because nobody's going to see it the way you do.
And that is, I guess, where I like that. I mean, not that I have to like it, but I see that being a huge play, I think, for anyone, especially, again, it doesn't matter male or female, but especially for women, the idea that for me, I'm like, you know what, if you don't say what it is that that you want to say too, it's I mean, it's not like that you don't trust, you trust your thoughts, right? You're having these thoughts, but then it's like trusting your voice and actually saying what you're thinking. And I think, to me, that's the power. What you're saying is, you know what, no one else is going to say probably exactly what you are thinking, because you come with your own experience, your level of expertise or strengths that you can play into as well, depending on your background. And so, but I think it's such an interesting phenomenon too. Like, I love getting into like the nuances of all these. Like, confidence to me is something that just is a really interesting, I think, area, because it's so hard sometimes to really pinpoint, how you can step into really fear to build confidence. But like, everyone wants confidence, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, I want to be confident, but what does that, again, what does that mean?
It's kind of fluffy.
Yes.
Right? Like, or it's like arbitrary. You're like,
yes.
Well, and I think too is like, and I've even realized this, because people are like, oh, you're so confident. And I'm like, there's a lot of inner talk that is not great, right? Like, I may come across that way, and I know I'm not the only person. I know every probably person in the world feels that way, right? So it's like, you can be scared and not totally confident and still just do it anyway.
Wow.
Right? Like, say it anyway. Like, it doesn't, if you want it to feel good every time, it's not going to. Like, there's no way.
That's a really great point. I've never looked at it that way. That's I love what you're saying, which is, right, sometimes it's like you're going to say something and it's going to flop anyway. Like, but that's going to happen. It's like you say, the game of numbers, right? Like, every ninth time that you maybe speak or have something to share, it might just fall flat, or it might be like people look at you like, what the hell are you talking about, or whatever. But the other 8 times, it's interesting that I find it so fascinating too, like, just how much pressure people put, like, we all put, like, we put on ourselves, right? To like, it has to be this way, or it needs to be perfect, or I can't make a mistake. And I'm like, I think that whole culture of not being able to make mistakes results in so much possibility just not being put out there. Right? It's totally. Right. It's like zaps possibilities and opportunities, because it just shuts it down. It just shuts.
I'm sure I know there's so many, like, you can probably look around your house and find so many things that started off with an idea that people are like, that's kind of not a great idea. And then it gets like working, or it peaks something else. Like, you don't know what your statement, it may not be totally powerful, but then it kicks off something else. Like, you're in that space for a reason. So, like, use it. And also too, you're like, people may not even be paying attention to you sometimes, right? That's what I'm like, you get so wrapped up and you're like, I don't even think they cared what I just said. But I mean, this is something I really struggled with. Like, I get nervous public speaking. I get, so having that voice, I think it's hard. And I think as, not that men don't, but I think as women, like, it's like men will see a job and they get like, they hit one of the requirements, like, I'm applying, and women fit all of them but one, and they're like, I couldn't do it. And you're just, I think that like carries with you that, but I think and I also too, I think for all of us, right, even you doing your coaching business, like, you have to do so much stuff that you do not feel good, not ethically good about, but like, you're not confident and you're scared and you're nervous.
Because it's all new. Like, a lot of it's so new that so it's funny. Yeah, you're right. I know that. I mean, I know exactly that feeling that you just shared is, there is a lot of newness as owning your own coaching practice, launching it, and then, wanting to see it like grow and prosper. There's a lot there, but So we're coming up, and one final question I did have for you was, what advice would you give to, and it might be very similar to before what we were talking about, but what advice would you give to, women out there who have just launched their coaching practice, and that you learned probably about yourself in this process? Like, what are just some of the things, like ideas that you would want to share or say to those individuals in terms of, hey, like, you got to keep moving forward based on what you had to go through?
Yeah, first of all, you've got this and you can do this. And you need to be doing this. Like, the world needs more people stepping up and supporting other people. I think it's like the good, the bad, the fear, the doubt, like that's so normal. Like, it shows you're probably doing the right thing, right? If all these, I don't want to say negative feelings, if these feelings come up, like, it probably shows you're doing it the right way. And to really trust I keep on using that, but like, trust yourself with the kind of practice you want to run, right? You don't have to be on social media. You don't have to do this. Like, what is organic to you? Like, I could have stayed in the child free because I still think that's such an untapped market, but it did not feel right to me. It was like, so I think it's that, and it's a long game, right? A lot of people do really well at first, but it takes a while. So you need to be showing up, not every day, but like consistently working on this. I think I admittedly thought that it would be a lot easier than it's been. I thought that I had really great connections. I thought I had, I have a public relations background, social media, like, I'm not worried about all that. Like, and it's still been a lot harder than I thought. So, but if your why is bigger than the hard, like, you're going to push through it, and you're going to know you get on social media because it's worth something bigger or that. And I think just, and don't get in the comparison game. That's in life. Like, it's the quickest way to be like, well, oh my God, they're making it. And it's like, you don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
That's a really great point. I think comparison is, it's a really interesting space to address, especially like you said, if you are launching your coaching practice, and with social media, I think it becomes even more heightened in terms of what you think, right? It's, again, some assumption that you may be making, or some interpretation of what you're seeing, when, to your point, you have no idea what that other person is actually going through. Like, it may look like they're killing it, and you're like, oh my God, they're killing it, because that's what you're telling yourself. But if you really, were speaking to them and they were being honest about where they're really at, they could be in a really tough place themselves, or really, struggling, if you will, like, right? So it's, I think that's great. And so what, well, that's it. Oh, so I was going to say, how can people reach you if they're watching this on the replay and they're like, wow, I'm really interested? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so thanks. So I have a website. It's HOLLYKRIVO.com, hollykrivo.com. I'm also on Instagram under Holly Krivo. So I'm doing some online workshops on being intentional during uncertainty. I'm starting a book club, which I'm super excited about. I'm like so stoked for that. Those are two platforms. Would love to hear from anybody that's just really needing support around trusting themselves, knowing that what they want to do, but they're listening to their shoulds. That's kind of what I'm on fire for.
Well, I'm so happy you actually were here today. I love this.
Is so fun.
I love the conversation and how it just kind of took its own course, which is exactly how I love stepping out to play, is kind of the conversation. Just the conversation takes it where it needs to go.
Well, thank you for doing this. I've watched a bunch of them and they're so great. And I know you're profiling so many inspiring people that'll just hearing their stories will help other people. So thank you for putting it together.
That's the whole point. So, but thank you. And I look forward to obviously seeing you, I'm sure every single day, not every day, but we're in contact, and I'm seeing you in social media, etc. So have an amazing day.
Maybe one day in real life.
Oh yeah, that's true. If you'll be back in the States anyway in mid-December. So, all right. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye.